I do think psilocybin works with our body's intelligence, our nervous system's intelligence, what some people called in the spiritual space our inner healer. Both the compound and this inner healer is actually just reminding us that the power and the agency is actually within us, right? It's not the compound that is giving that to us, it is always there. It's just reminding us that this is always there. And you choose, and you have the power to do whatever you want with it afterwards.
Welcome to Don't Step on the Bluebells, the podcast where personal healing and transformation take center stage. I'm your host, Amanda Parker, and I'm a fellow seeker on the journey of personal growth. Join me as I delve into the stories of gifted healers, guides, and everyday people who have experienced remarkable transformations. Listen in as they share their practical wisdom to enrich your everyday life. And don't forget to hit subscribe and never miss a new episode. Welcome to today's episode of Don't Step on the Bluebells, where we're talking all things healing with psilocybin. I'm joined today with the incredibly talented Jessika Lagarde, a trauma-informed plant medicine facilitator, earth keeper, educator, and co-founder of Women on Psychedelics. Today, we're talking all things about psilocybin, the way that it actually helps people to heal, what a session really looks like, and what it means when you engage in a retreat using this powerful plant medicine, and some of the remarkable transformations that are possible. Let's dive in. Jessika, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us on Don't Step on the Bluebells.
Thank you for the invitation, Amanda. I'm excited to be here as well.
We were connected through a mutual contact. Actually, I'm not even sure you knew we were connected, but I was given your information by another guest who was on the podcast, my first guest, actually, Jacobine van der Weijden. So she runs the Microdosing Institute in the Netherlands, and she basically said you have to get in touch with Jessika to be able to dive a bit deeper into this context and everything else.
Yeah. I had the lucky actually to work with Jacobin for the past year as well with the Microdosing Institute, helping out with some co-facilitation. So yeah, I'm pretty happy that she connected us both actually.
Yeah, I am too. And I find it really interesting because a lot of people working in this space there's many different ways to work with this kind of plant medicine. So she had shared with us earlier in the podcast, what it means to take microdoses, and not just that, not just the impact on your body, but also even thinking about um just the way society views these kind of things, because it's really like bigger questions that's on a lot of people's minds. So I know you work with this a little bit differently. Maybe you want to tell us just a little bit about the way that you're working in this world of facilitation and supporting people.
Yeah, so, well, I try to bridge a little bit of both things, right? I do the facilitation in microdosing, but also most of my work is actually focused on the macro journeys, which is actually working with psilocybin, most specifically here in the Netherlands, because it's the only psychedelic that is actually legal. And the way we do that is through intentional journeys, and these journeys, they can happen within a container of one person with the facilitator, or within a group ceremony, or even within retreat experiences. And this high journey, or like this higher dose experience, can look quite different than the microdosing journeys. But in principle, we touch base in very similar aspects of the self, right? Like the way that I see that is the best way to work with psychedelics is really to put intention and attention into what aspects of your life you feel like you need some changing, or you need some help with, or where you want to develop more self-awareness, and where are sometimes certain blockages that you have been experienced, where are you feeling stuck. And these compounds really have the potential to actually shine a light in those aspects, or yeah, just be an amplifier in what parts of you that you are that have been blurry for a little bit of time. So that's how I really see that they can be quite significant in bringing about change into a person's life. And I do feel that the macrodose journeys, like they do offer that possibility within certain, how would I say that? There are certain ways that can be more optimal and like better experienced. And that would be throughout guidance, also like having different support systems that can support that experience. And I'm pretty sure we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that as well. But just to touch a little bit on that, is that the fact that it's not just a pill or anything that you're going to take and suddenly everything is going to change and magic is going to happen, uh, which has been one of the main concerns I have since all these things psychedelic related have become quite popular in the media. But it's really the way you actually work with the compounds that matter.
That's really interesting. You bring up already so many facets that I want to touch on. But just to clarify for a moment, so what is macrodose? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, a microdose, specifically with psilocybin, would be a certain amount that is between, in this case, in the Netherlands, when we're talking about psilocybin truffles and not psilocybin mushrooms. I think that's one thing that I actually should clarify a little bit more because the dosing in there is a little bit different. When we're talking about psilocybin mushrooms, usually their intake is made as dry mushrooms, and uh, low dose would be between 1 and 2 grams. And if you are talking about a higher dose journey, a macro dose, it would be between 4 5 grams of dry mushrooms. And now, when we come to truffles, the truffles are actually wet. So when they are taken, so the the dose sounds quite bigger in terms of number, but it's basically the same thing, and that would be between 30 and 45 grams of truffles. Yes, I have to explain that often to clients that come here because I say that to people and they feel like I'm talking about 45 grams of dry mushrooms, and that sounds really insane. Yeah, but yeah, it is quite different. But in principle, the effects are the same. And of course, we have all sorts of different strains of truffles as well as mushrooms, and different strains have different effects, basically visual effects, or some are more prone to introspective experiences. Others are more for, I don't know, being giggly with your friends. So
So when someone comes in, because you also talked about a journey, and that's a word that I think we use a lot in like the healing and energy space, but someone who's not as familiar is probably like, okay, what the hell are these journeys? So when you're taking someone on a journey, what exactly does that mean?
Hmm. Well, think about as if you would be watching a movie, for example, and you go to the movie theater and you really get fully immersed in that experience as almost as if you would be part of that story. This is one way that I see it, like this journey with the truffles, but at times it can look like more like a movie of your life or a movie of a certain aspect of your life. And I call it a journey because it does has the experience itself has certain stages from beginning to the end, and also you are kind of navigating different emotions through it, or you are kind of being confronted with different aspects of yourself, or at times with different feelings that might arise, and it really feels like a whole adventure that you are going in, but it's like really inwards experience if you are doing it in this context and in this setting and this type of container that is the container um, that was created for healing purposes or for therapeutical purposes. So this is more or less why I call it a journey, although very oftentimes I like to emphasize we call it a journey, but the journey actually starts when the truffle journey ends, because that's actually when you have the insights and a whole other process can start in your life that can involve certain life changers or looking deeper into behavior patterns or yeah, really seeing what are the things in your life that need some sort of attention to.
So it sounds like the psilocybin itself is actually the door opener. So you can have some insights or epiphanies, but then you actually need to do the work of seeing what does that actually mean in my life now.
Yeah, so it's just exactly beautifully described. That's how I like to see the compound, actually. Um, I don't see it as a magic bullet that is basically showing something new about yourself, but rather just, yeah, again, putting an amplifier on some things that you already know and you just didn't want to acknowledge or you didn't want to look in there. Um, that being said, I do think psilocybin works with our body's intelligence or our nervous system's intelligence and what some people called in the spiritual space our inner healer. So both the compound and this inner healer, they work together to actually ignite something inside of us that we can choose to make something out of it, to take action towards afterwards. But you can also just have an amazing experience and have insights and don't do anything about it, right? So, but this is also the aspect of it that I find is pretty incredible, is actually just reminding us that the power and the agency is actually within us, right? It's not the compound that is giving that to us, it is always there. It's just reminding us that this is always there, and you choose and you have the power to do whatever you want with it afterwards.
So, something I find fascinating to understand. We're getting a better idea of what it is that you do and how you help people. If you were to imagine that you're talking to your 5-year-old self and explaining to 5-year-old Jessica what it is that you do in the world, how would you describe it to her?
Wow. That was a big question. Okay. Um, I think I would say that basically I go with people to a place that they once knew and they have maybe forgotten. And basically, I'm just there um, to make sure that they feel safe enough to explore those terrains and those landscapes. And while I'm there, they know that everything's fine, everything's welcome. And this is also why I call myself more a facilitator rather than a guide. I am just there to ensure that whatever needs to unfold will happen in the most safe way as possible. And at the end of the experience, I'm also there to carry the person through whatever is needed or whatever kind of support is needed. So for my 5-year-old self, I don't know, it could be like a good school teacher or somebody who is taking, yeah, them on an excursion through a museum or something. Yeah, I think that would be an easy way. Yeah.
Well, it was a really beautiful description of how you help keep people safe. And a 5-year-old would get that, and so would an adult. We don't often have those spaces where we really feel safe to experience ourselves, and a lot of people are just so afraid of what will come up.
Hmm.
They're really scared of what they're gonna have to confront or what they need to know, so
Yeah,
that was a
yeah.
really beautiful way of putting it.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, and again, this safety aspect also looks different for everyone, right? Like, so this is also part of this process is actually working with people to understand what safety means to them, because it will look different. And really, making sure that the person feels seen, heard, and carried throughout the experience is a really big part of what can allow vulnerability to actually happen and what can actually empower the person to have the strength to go to those places that sometimes we don't want to go. But if you go there and you know there is somebody else out here in presence or sometimes just holding your hand, it can really make a whole difference in terms of like how much you surrender or how much you go into the experience.
I can say I'll share a little bit just of my own experience. So I haven't done this with psilocybin and I haven't done a macro dose in that way, but I did work with ayahuasca in a retreat setting. And it was so hard to let go. And I know especially there I had done a few ceremonies in that retreat, and that first ceremony, I mean, I did not wanna let go. I was holding on to control, I was aware of everything happening in the room around me, and I remember having to set the intention for myself on maybe it was the second, ceremony, the second journey that we did of, "Okay, now the intention is surrender," and that was a very different experience.
I can imagine that for sure. But it's also interesting, like when we have experiences in which we can actually observe how difficult it is to let go, or even what letting go means, right? Because
Yeah,
I don't feel like
exactly, like, what
sometimes
is that?
we don't fully grasp what that means until we go into an experience like that, or until we are faced with something in life that we actually realize control is an illusion and we have absolutely no control over anything. So yeah, I feel like, yeah, this can also shine a light in which are the ways in life that at times we give ourselves more anxiety and worry.
That is for sure. How did you actually get into this work? What was it that drove you to begin?
Yeah, so basically, I think I'm pretty much like everybody else. I bumped into psychedelics when I first moved to Amsterdam in 2018. And I started to actually have experiences in more of a recreational setting, um, which is very common and very popular around here. And I feel at times recreational is very much underlooked. But these experiences have been responsible for so much of me tapping into my self expression and connection to my creative side and connection to music and to others in such spaces. And it took me about a year to actually um, start to go into experiences with more of a therapeutical lens and focusing more on healing. Not that before in these recreational experiences, I did also experience healing one way or another. But when you actually take a compound like this in a different container, as we were talking about before, there is so much more that can emerge. And again, when you put intention, when you work alongside a facilitator or you work alongside a therapist or you have a whole other support system around you, there's so much more than you can get from the psilocybin experience. So it was only in 2020 then that I started doing more of this work. I got some mentorship and I started sitting for people. Sitting basically means, yeah, facilitating these experiences for group journeys or 201 sessions. And yeah, since then, I actually dove, yeah, quite deep in doing a lot of that around here because the advantage that I have around here is, again, it's legal to do the work that I do, which in most places that's not the case. And since then, I had the chance to actually be with many people and get training for that to be trauma informed and actually understand the multidimensionality of the work that I'm doing and what it actually means to work with compounds that have been used by indigenous cultures for hundreds of years, and what does it mean also to start using those and applying them through a more western context. So it has been a really deep process compressed in just this last 4 years, I would say.
Sounds a lot like, well, the healer's journey, honestly, but also in the coaching journey. You can't become a coach unless you experience it yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
don't really know what it means, and you can't take people further than you've gone yourself.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. In your process of becoming this facilitator and really going deeper, you're also taking yourself deeper to see what's really possible.
Yes, yes, no, 100%. And I think, especially when you're talking about psychedelic work, your own experiences are, I try to see that like they are part of your training, right? Like you cannot guide somebody through a terrain that you haven't been before. And the more you engage in self-discovery and actually breaking down conditioning and self-beliefs and all of that, the better you are in supporting other people throughout that process. So I like to often use the analogy of you wouldn't want to enter an airplane with a pilot that didn't learn how to fly. So that's basically how I see the work that I do. And this is why like I have had quite a few experiences myself. I every year attend a retreat or ceremony guided by other facilitators because it's a lifelong inner work, but it's also a work that you are constantly have to put yourself in the place of a student. So in the case, and why do I say that? Is because it's also a very relational work and it's a vulnerable work both for the facilitator and for the person who is going into the experience. And what we want to do is avoid any sort of like projection from the facilitator side or being compromised in the space that you are holding because of some inner process that you didn't look into before.
That's interesting. I learned that, so I'm trained in Reiki, and I remember learning that in the Reiki training that was you have to continuously be looking at your own energy and clearing and all of this because otherwise, if you're in a session and something comes up, you have to know if it's yours or not.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
this does this belong to the client? Is this mine? And I've had that happen a few times, and a lot of it is also intuitive and you have to feel your way through. But if I haven't been doing my own work in those moments and I say, I'm noticing something in the stomach, no, the stomach's fine. I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be back. No. So you really have to be able to see that and decipher what's yours and what's not.
Yes, yes, yes. And especially in the psychedelic containers as well, when we're talking about trauma informed approach, uh, is really seeing in what ways your behavior or like your response to whatever is happening in that space can be helpful or it can be a trigger or it can re-traumatize a person. So you really need to keep um, yeah, this level of self-awareness very present as well and really check in with yourself like am I going now uh, to assist or give like a hand, is this coming from me or is that person really needing that, as an example. So
So you've said trauma informed, and I see this all over now, right? And it's become very popular in different fields of work. What does that actually mean? If you could shed some light for us on what is trauma informed?
yeah, so basically being trauma informed is actually having coming from an understanding, and this obviously comes from the training that I got, that comes a bit from somatic experiencing and the teachings from Peter Levine and Gabor Mate, is this understanding that everyone in our society has a certain level of trauma. And this can be like big T trauma, like
Mhm.
big traumatic events, like car accident, death of a family member, or anything like that, or small T traumas, which at times are things that we don't even consider or think are traumas. Like, for example, being neglected by your parents when you were young, or a divorce in your family, or at times it is not really what happened, but the way you responded to something that happened while you were a child. And when we actually have this understanding and look at people and try to understand how much of their childhood and history influences the way they move through the world right now, we can better support them throughout these experiences. So, being trauma informed is actually taking the time to look into that, do like a proper intake, understand what are the trauma responses that a person can have, what are the things that make a person feel unsafe or safe, and yeah, what is the best way that you can actually create this safe enough container for each individual so that you can, as a facilitator, give them the best response as possible. Can give you a short example on that, because I think that's also very helpful. Is that the because we are all very unique, there can be times that the way that I respond to a client in terms of attention, for one person can be triggering, for another person it can be actually this is exactly what I needed. So if you know the history of this person and what kind of trauma responses they have, then you are better able to give them exactly what they need. So if you have somebody who have a history of not feeling validated by their parents or by people in their surroundings, and you are there as a facilitator, what you want to do is actually be there for whatever they are saying. And if they say they need something, you try to give that in the best possible way. If they say they are feeling something, you really try to be there and listen. So, yeah, this is just one quick example of that.
So you're really taking the time to get to know the people that come in and understand what are some of these either stories or beliefs or patterns that are showing up for them
Yeah.
that you can be aware of and maybe even help them work through, depending what that is.
And at times, actually, help them being aware of that themselves, right? Because the majority of people don't even think about these things, right? Like, I see that within myself. Like 6 years ago, I would be walking through the world being completely unaware of why certain things happen in my life, or why certain cycles keep repeating themselves, until I actually, yeah, started studying all of this and actually looking into all of this. So, but in general, like I feel if you want to dive into psychedelic work, or if you want to do any sort of psychedelic work, even if it is with a microdosing, being supported by a facilitator, this person should always take the time to get to know you. And it should be a longer, extended process. Because if you want to make these experiences safe enough again and more beneficial than harmful, then this preparation and this longer intake and this curiosity and like really going there can make a huge difference on how the experience unfolds and how the microdosing journey unfolds, and actually how integration happens afterwards. So I do feel like, yeah, that's super, super important in general.
Yeah, that is powerful. And as you said, it's a lot of people are starting to explore and experience and experiment with psychedelics now. It's becoming more widely available. And I'm certain that there's not as many places doing it this way where it's really intentional and you create the safety and you develop the understanding. And it doesn't mean they can't be impactful in different ways, but it's certainly, I guess, what's your goal? That's the thing to really know. What is it that you're hoping to get? Because if you want to work through these blocks or things have been standing in your way and you really, as you said earlier, want to like clear that blurry feeling, like the inability to really see clearly, then you want to make sure you're really doing this in the right way.
Yeah, yeah, no, but you are absolutely right. That's not necessarily what happens. Especially again, picking up the context that we have here in the Netherlands, that these things are legal and they are fairly accessible when you have a whole range of offerings around. Um, the reality is, we have a culture that we like faster. better, stronger, quicker. I don't know, like everyone likes the quick fix. We don't like, to put hard, long work is, it takes effort. And a lot of people would like to get the shortcut. And unfortunately, again, the way the media has promoted psychedelics at times has been a little bit with coming from that lens. They can have a huge impact, but it might not be long lasting because it is a combination of really putting the effort and things into action and not just taking a pill. This has been the culture, yeah, for many years with like antidepressants and all the other stuff that we just take pills and like not really address the core or like the root cause of things. Then we are not really fixing anything, right? Like we're just numbing. So that's not really something you can do with psychedelics. They make it a little bit more difficult to do that. They rather bring things to the surface, but you still need to have this big part, which is your own self choosing, yeah, to do something about it.
I see that a lot in the work that I do as well. And I think that's the point at which, like, when I tell someone you don't need a coach, like, you can do this on your own, but it really helps to have someone guiding you through the process. So it's not so, I guess, also overwhelming. I mean, if you see, oh, okay, I can have this great experience on psychedelics and everything's going to be changed, some people might be inclined to say, yes, I'll do that. Thank you.
Hmm.
But they don't realize that what they're actually missing out on by having guidance or someone who's really there with them to support them through the process.
Yeah. Also, to actually sometimes help see things through a different lens or
Yeah.
hold themselves accountable. Sometimes we do need a push or we do need to talk to other people so that we actually have new insights ourselves when we are sharing something, right? Like every time I go and ask for advices of friends or anything like that, I automatically have a different view on things that I'm sharing. So it's, yeah, I agree with you. It's not something like you need to, but if you do so, it also shows that you are putting more attention and intention into what you're doing, right? So I feel like that's where the potential really lies.
Let's talk a bit about how this process works. So, if someone says, I really want to have this experience, what happens then? Do they call you? Do you work like, is it a retreat setting? Does someone say, hey, can I come into your office?
Mm.
How do you actually work with this?
Yeah. Yeah, so it can look different depending of yeah, how they want to start doing this work, right? Like if they want to do this as a one-on-one process or if they want to do that as a group process. Both processes have different qualities to it. um, I do have a preference for group work because I find that because most of our core beliefs and core wounds come from relationships. So it is through relationships that we actually get to heal those. And group work has an amazing ability to actually do that in a very beautiful way. But at times, that can be people are not ready to be in a whole, full blown ceremony retreat container because it is intense. Like it's not easy as you described with your ayahuasca experience. So that being said, it's not for everybody either. That's why we also have the one-on-one work, which is what they are trying to bring through over the next years with psychedelic psychotherapy under the medical model. And the way this process can look like, both for the group work and for the one-on-one work or 201 work, is having an intake at first. And ideally, if you want to work with a facilitator, a guide, this intake is important. I need to emphasize that because if you're thinking about taking up psychedelic and somebody doesn't do the intake, that's a huge, huge red flag. And this intake can be done via a call or filling up a form, or most often both. And it basically means really getting to know the history of the person, the medical history as well, but also like assessing what is their current emotional state, or what are the things that they have been experiencing right now, if they have any history of bipolar, schizophrenia, or borderline in the family, because these are really also red flags and not advisable for people that have that history.
Could you just say for a moment why?
Yeah, so psychedelics, again, they are not, unfortunately, yeah, they are not for everybody. So they are not compounds that are safe for everybody to just take them and have a good experience with it. People that have that history of mental disorders, or like, I don't like to use that word, but that's the word that most people will understand what I'm talking about, are more susceptible to actually have some sort of psychosis or negative experiences if they take psychedelics. And this is one of the things that most facilitators are trying to filter, because we do not have enough research to see if psychedelics can be helpful for people with that history or at all. So in this case, it's better be safe than anything else. Um, so the intake and the medical screening is usually to look into those things, and also look if the person is in a current emotional state that is very unstable or very dangerous, like suicidal ideation, or not having actually people in their support system. Then it's probably better if they don't take psychedelics. So this is how we start the process, and we start to look into, hey, yeah, you think you're a good fit, and it's actually a good fit for you. But let's, dive a little bit deeper. What exactly you're trying to get from this? So this is where it enters a process of preparation and understanding intention and managing expectations and understanding, you know, the way I work, like I was, as we talked before, through a trauma informed lens. All of these things that make this person, so that we can create together an experience that is going to be helpful, that is going to be, the optimal, safe enough container, so that they can explore their inner selves.
I always try to put myself in the shoes of someone who has very little experience, but a lot of curiosity. And they might be listening, really thinking, like, I don't know, like, is this scary? Should I do it? How does it work?
Mm,
And so listening to you really share what that's like is a bit of that demystifying process. That's a
mm-hmm.
little, okay, this is not just some scary thing that I don't understand and don't know how to engage with, but there's real people who are like highly trained. They know how to guide me through, and it's something that I can actually access.
These fears and concerns are very valuable, and they make a lot of sense, right? Like, if you look into the history of psychedelics and how everything got prohibited in the past, you don't read very nice things about it. So there is a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of like really scary ideas that can, show up about these compounds. So this is also why I do a big part of my work is actually the educational work,
Hmm.
to try to re-educate people on, and especially women, on what psychedelics actually are and what can they actually do for you, and how to do that in a safe and responsible manner. Um, but some fears that I see often people having is, am I going to go crazy? Which is a very normal one, because it was a lot in propaganda in the past. Or am I going to stay like this forever? Or is this
Mhm.
going to mess up my brain? Or sometimes it's like, is this going to make me quit my job and move to the jungle and things
It
like that?
might, no.
It might.
But only if that's your journey.
Exactly. So, these are very valid fears,
Yeah.
and we try to work with those fears, and understand them deeper throughout the preparation process as well, because it's also part of making sure the person will feel safe enough for the experience, and really having trust not only on what the experience can look like, on the facilitator, on the compound they are working with, but also on themselves, is really, really super important.
I think that people don't realize actually how much work and thought goes into this experience. I don't think, I mean, for those who are not as experienced, for people who have, worked with these compounds, as you put it before, they will have an understanding of it. But for a lot of people, you just have no idea how much thoughtfulness really goes in
Yeah.
and into guiding people through a positive experience. Like the purpose of doing this, the reason that you're coming together is to help create change and shift and to help bring awareness, whatever that looks like, to the person who needs it. So you're actually just facilitating a space where people get what they need to do the work they need to do. And
Mhm.
the psilocybin itself is an aid, a very important aid in that process, but it's still just one piece of the overarching puzzle of how you get there.
Yes, exactly. And this is exactly how I like to see the psilocybin itself, right? Like it's not
Mhm.
the main thing and it's not the main tool, right? But it's
Yeah.
a combination of different tools that you are combining to support you throughout your healing journey or your journey back to yourself. So that's why we talk a lot about the container as well, like how the certain setting. So like the mindset the person is on, like during the experience or the days prior to it, the place where the experience takes place, who is there to support you, and the dose, how much you're taking from that compound, how much do you know about that compound and about the effects that it has on the body,
Mm.
and how much actually, yeah, psychoeducational information you have received beforehand. This is very helpful as well, so that you feel like more trust in the process. And not only that, but also like how much support you're going to get afterwards, which is quite a big piece as well. So it's really that combination
Mm.
that makes a psychedelic experience something that can be life changing and long lasting.
And so when someone, let's say they're a good fit, they've done the intake, everything, you're convinced this will be supportive for them. What would that journey look like? Is that, do people come in for one day? Is it a couple hours, or do you do these retreats over many days? So what's that like for you?
So for a 201 session or 101 individual session
When
or
you
a
say
day's.
2-on-1, is that like 2 facilitators,
Yes.
1
So
okay, okay.
sometimes, so most of my work I do with women,
Okay,
and then I do in one-on-one sessions. But if I am to have a male client, then I will work with another guide or another facilitator who is going to be a male as well. At times, I do like to work with a partner guide in general, just because you have like parental figures holding the space, and that can be very helpful for people. But when it is a group setting, so it's a group ceremony or a group retreat, we have a whole team of facilitators that are there present for the group, and this usually happens in a ratio of one facilitator per three participants. How that looks like for individual sessions, it is that the person will go there to their place, or they will come to wherever the ceremony is taking place, and in the morning, and they stay there until the evening time, or I stay there until the evening time, and the experience actually unfolds throughout the course of 5 hours, adding 1 hour before and 1 hour after, in which I do a check in. I can do meditation, breath work. We can dive deep again on the intentions for the journey, and also after is really make sure that they have the initial integration support of the experience. So sometimes they feel like they want to engage in more conversation. All the time is just like being there in presence. And when it comes to a retreat experience, this is a little bit longer. This is like a 5 days experience. And in that case, we do have two ceremonies within those 5 days, and workshops that are also focused on, supporting that process, and including a lot of body movement as well, bringing people back into their bodies, sharing circles so everybody can relate to each other experience, and that we actually get to understand that we are all co-creating this container together. So it's not just something that the facilitators are doing and they're basically holding it, but also all the other participants that are there are also part of the experience for each other, right? Like, and that's the amazing thing about group work is that we can be there and be mirrors for each other in triggering ways or in other ways. So this is basically, yeah, how it looks like for, yeah, the different types of experiences. And again, they're very different, so it really depends on the needs of the person and what they are looking for, because as well some retreats can have more of a shamanic spiritual approach, and the sessions they can look a little bit more, yeah, like therapeutical in the sense of like more psychotherapeutical framework and all of that. And some people feel more attracted to one and the other, some people feel ready to do one but not the other, so it depends on individual needs.
Well, I'm wondering because I know from ayahuasca that it can be sometimes quite a physical journey as well. To put that nicely. Is that a similar experience with the psilocybin?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but a bit different because with ayahuasca you have a lot of it's quite intense with the purging, right? Like the
Mm,
vomiting and all of that. And psilocybin, that does not necessarily happens, especially if you make a tea out of the truffles, then it really calms your stomach and you don't need to puke. Uh, but yeah, the funny thing is, like, a lot of people, when they think about psychedelics, they really have a very specific idea of like how a psychedelic experience looks like, right? Like things are melting, I don't know, like moving
colors
around, the
and
colors.
rainbows.
Yes, that can happen, but it's not always like that, right?
Mm,
And as I mentioned before, the way I understand and I see how they actually work is speaking the same language that your nervous system speaks. And what do I mean by that? Is it speaks the languages of sensations. That translates very directly into feelings in your body and having a very physical experience most of the times. And that's how the psilocybin experience can look like
mm,
as well. You will see things. You will, yeah, be able to have images or memories going through your mind. But more than anything else, you will feel things. It's a really a feeling
mm,
experience, an experience of being and being present with what's going on in the body. And this intelligence of the body, which I find it is more intelligent than the mind itself.
mm,
So a lot of the stuff we have, they actually get stuck in the body and different parts of the body. And at times this can be manifested as disease, or like when we are stressed, we can actually feel that in the body at times much faster than when we actually acknowledge that by the mind. And during these experiences, you can really have very clear signals of where things are stored in your
mm.
body's intelligence. So
Interesting.
for some people, they can be shaking hands, or like they can also be giggling, they can also be crying, or different types of emotional releases. Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's so fascinating because I mean, I know this from my work. I've heard it on the podcast from other healers and just the way that we are really holding all of these emotions, storing them inside, the kind of pain or disease or anything that that might lead to, and the ways that you're really trying to look at what that root cause is to release it. Because if you just, ow, my back hurts, you go to like
Mm,
physiotherapy, great. But what happens when that same pain or stress or fear comes back in 5 months? Well, your back's probably going to hurt again. So
exactly.
it's fascinating that, from what I understand, that you're saying the psilocybin actually helps you feel that, to actually physically feel where that is and what are the emotions that are tied to it so that you can really have that experience and, of course, in the safe space, move through it.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the times, these experiences are going to be the start of some sort of emotional release and some sort of that, yeah, start of that release. Sometimes you have a completion, but other times,
Mm,
most of the times, you don't have a full cycle happening throughout one experience. So that would mean that you continue to work through that on integration with somatic therapists or
Mhm.
any other, yeah, means of support that is needed.
And I also just want to emphasize something that I've heard you talking about, um, that it's not just the journey itself. It's really a lot about the preparation, how you get ready for that journey, the intention, why you're going into it, what it is you want to get from it. And then after it's complete, there's an integration phase. So you're
Mm,
actually taking the time to understand what are the changes I need to make, or what's that maybe inner work or what's been illuminated that I can now take forward and look into to
yeah,
help me heal these parts of myself that need that work
yeah,
and need that
yeah.
support.
Yeah, integration is basically translating whatever comes out of your experience into your daily life, right? And that can at times looks like, yeah, behavior change or a career change or like relationship changes.
Or moving to the jungle.
Yeah, moving to the jungle. These are the most difficult ones, right? Like sometimes it's changing really small habits as well. um, Other times is as simple as just go get some rest, take a break. And integration can naturally unfold as well. Like, and I find that unfolds much easier if you do have an in-depth preparation process, right?
Mhm.
Because that already shows the commitment of the person to their to do their inner work. And then during integration, things are going to flow much easier as well.
So I'd love to hear if you have any maybe stories that you could share with us, if there's maybe a particular moment with, obviously keeping the confidentiality of the people you work with, but some kind of transformation that you saw that was possible through this work. Or maybe for
Hmm.
you that was remarkable that you couldn't
Mm,
believe this had happened.
yeah. Well, I can think about different ones. One is of a client who had a big history of drug addiction. And he came here, and after one psilocybin session, he has never got in contact with the drug again. And this has been 3 years now, and every year he comes for one session
Mhm.
per year, uh, to actually, I feel like in a way it gives him this confirmation that he doesn't need that coping anymore. Another example that I can think about, it was of a client that I had last year. She had terminal cancer, and since she got the diagnosis, she was all the time hyper alert, stressed and nervous. And she came here to have the psilocybin experience, and she actually fell asleep, which I didn't know it was possible, by the way. I was like, oh. And she slept for the entire journey. And at the end of it, she was like, it was actually the first time she got a whole deep rest and sleep. So this is why I say, like, I really see how these compounds work with our intelligence and what our body knows and what our body needs. And the experiences can look very different for every person. Yeah, I can also think of oh god, so many examples with me and myself, and I feel like they have been extremely helpful for me in how to deal with anxiety. And the way psilocybin did that for me was really helping me understand it better and how to relate to the anxiety in a different way rather than actually cure and get rid of my anxiety. So that's why I see like how they work together with us, but they don't do the work for us, right? And what we do with it afterwards is really important.
Wow, that's really powerful. And just about the first story that you shared with this client who has overcome a drug addiction, I guess it's a bit counterintuitive, right? Because people might be worried that, okay, maybe you should stay away from the substance, but that it actually has a way of working with you just to help you, I guess, see yourself deeper, to see what's really important to you and what matters to you. And it's not working in the same way as maybe, I don't know what he was addicted to in the past.
Crystal meth.
Mm,
But yeah, like it's also, again, it's about the way we see these substances, right? Like in our society, right? Like if you talk to indigenous healers who have been working with psychedelics or plant medicine for a really long time, they would never call psilocybin mushrooms drugs. They're fungi, they are plants,
yeah.
right? It's
It's,
interesting how we came to a point in our world that we make some plants forbidden because they are drugs. But on top of that, psilocybin is, if you look in the addiction chart, that's the most absolutely non-addictive substance ever. I would be very surprised if somebody get addicted to mushrooms because it's not easy to take them and be like, "Hey, here is all your shit." Oh yeah, I enjoy that. Let
I'll
me do
do
it
that
again next
again.
week. So yeah, and this is why it's like so crazy how in in the US and like so many other countries in the world it's really like in a blacklist.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, they can be good for treating addiction as well. Yeah.
If people want to learn more, so let's say they're not quite ready to jump in yet, they want to learn, they maybe want to just understand what different possibilities there are. Are there any resources or books or tools, things like that, that you would recommend that someone has a look at? Maybe things that helped on your journey too.
Oh yes, definitely. There's a very popular one um, from a few years back, which is the book "How to Change Your Mind" by Michael Pollan. And why do I think it's a really cool resource? I give that to clients very often. Is because Netflix did a show very recently, also on this, that is pretty well done. And I think if you don't like reading that huge book, which is quite big, you can just go to Netflix and watch that show. You can also watch Fantastic Fungi. There's a lot of videos on YouTube as well from the Big Think that I think are very helpful in understanding what are all these compounds about in a very short period of time. Of course, there's a whole range of platforms out there that you can look into. We do have one, Women on Psychedelics, that is mostly focused on women's experiences. And there we share a lot of articles that is also women sharing their stories and what psychedelics has have done for them. So I think that's also a really good way of understanding the multiple type of uses and outcomes that you can have if you work with these substances.
Yeah, that's amazing and super helpful. I'll definitely be sharing those resources as well in the show notes so that anyone who's curious and wants to learn more has easy access to them. What would you say is there any advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out on this journey?
Take it slow, do your research, be curious about it. And when I say do the research, it's not only about the psychoeducational material, but also if you feel like, yeah, I'm ready, see what compound might be most interesting for you, or where would you go to for that. So of course different places have they can bring up very different types of experiences, right? You're not going to have the same experience if you are coming to the Netherlands than if you are just going to into the Amazon jungle. So do a research as well with in who you are working with. But more than that, when I say take it slow, is so that you really understand that it's a process. It's good to have some sort of support system or therapists or friends and people that actually know what you want to go into. Just because this is the best and most safe way to get the most out of these experiences. And take slow again to understand that change takes time. Healing also takes time, right? Like we cannot just undo a whole life of conditioning uh, in one day. uh, but yeah, really also having that understanding that is feels like very counterintuitive to the world that is so fast paced that we live in today. But taking things slow is really a big part of this process.
That is very valuable advice for all of us. Maybe you can share a bit about what it is that you have going on at the moment. So, what are you excited about? How are you excited to help people? What are you working on next?
Hmm. Yeah, so I still do a lot of my educational work through Women of Psychedelics, and I have two offerings that are coming up very soon about springtime, which will be an introductory educational support for small groups. One is focused on microdosing journeys for women, and the other one will be for intentional psychedelic journeys. And the reason why I'm doing that is, again, you see from everything that I shared with you today, I really think that educational piece is really important, and that's where you actually start. So these are my main focus for this year, but I'm also gonna be partaking in some retreats as a co-facilitator, and I also still offer my services of 201 101 sessions or ceremonies. So if anybody is interested about that, they can find me on my website. We would do that whole process that I described and always find out if it is a good fit, a right match. But if not, I can always also forward people to other people in my network that might be a better match. So
And for all of those pieces, the education and actually doing a journey with you, is that all face to face in the Netherlands? Can that be done online, or what does that look like?
the whole process can be done online except for the session. So the session has to be done in the Netherlands for obvious safe reasons. Preparation and integration and the educational piece, everything can be done online from the comfort of your home.
And I'll share all of your contact information in the show notes so they know exactly how they can get in touch. Are there any last words or pieces of wisdom that you want to make sure comes across before we close?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I would leave it with something that I always tell people when they are starting to board this process with me or with anybody else, and something that I like to call cost, which means curiosity, openness, surrender, and trust, which are really big pieces to have, the best psychedelic experience you can possibly imagine. But these are also big pieces for life's journey in general. So I would leave that just as a reminder.
That's beautiful. So we should all take cost into mind. Thank you so much for sharing so much of the work that you do and really shedding a lot of light on a topic that people are definitely curious about and don't always know where to get the right information. So, your generosity of being open about what that looks like and how you really help people and how this can actually help people is much appreciated. So,
Oh,
thank
thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for the invite. I'm very happy for this.
And to everyone tuning in, thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the show notes and the pod sheet associated with this episode, where you'll get all this valuable information and more that can help you learn more about this psychedelic and psilocybin journey. And until next time, thanks for tuning in to Don't Step on the Bluebells. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. To dive deeper into today's conversation, make sure to visit www.don'tsteponthebluebells.com and grab your exclusive pod sheet. It's packed with valuable takeaways that will enrich your listening experience. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.